So I'm going to come out of the closet today. I'm pretty firmly a liberal. I know it's a surprise to all of you here. I don't mean liberal politically, I mean socially and theologically and about every other way you can define it. And I wear it proudly, but I also know not everyone is in my groove, and that's okay. But on Tuesday, November 8th, the U.S. held their election. And you know the outcome. Thankfully, I had last weekend off so I could recover in radium, soak it out in the hot springs. It was helpful. And I, like many other progressives on the left, spent a sleepless night and awoke kind of shell-shocked. The next day, my focus shifted from Trump the candidate to the voters who had elected him. And now I acknowledge that the reasons people voted for Trump were complicated, and an economic hollowing of the Rust Belt certainly played a major role. The way of life in rural areas across North America has dramatically changed. And having spent 8 months in Oyen, I get the yearning for a simpler time. But a look at the statistics revealed that 87% of the voters were white. And for me, the most hard to swallow was that 81% of white evangelical Christians had cast their vote for him. But most importantly, his support came predominantly from rural and small cities under 50,000, and large urban populations that were diverse voted Democrat. The divisions in this country were starkly drawn as these statistics came out. And I, like many other liberals, wondered what had happened to the kinder, gentler city on the hill that had seemed to be coming to fruition, that diverse and vibrant country that had seemed to be emerging in the Obama years. And in the aftermath of the election, it seems that something has been unleashed. Incidences of racist graffiti and hate crimes have been on the rise, the FBI says. I try to focus on the fact that Hillary won the popular vote, so most people aren't like that, and really half the country didn't vote. And mostly that I live in Canada, and this could never happen here. But hints of how these things spill over into our country are evident. In just one day in Ottawa, racist messages were spray painted on a Jewish synagogue and also on a United Church with a very prominent African-Canadian minister, Anthony Bailey. There's this Facebook group called Pantsuit Nation. Maybe some of you are a part of it. It's closed, and it's for sort of pro-Hillary supporters. And after the election, people began to speak of their fears in the face of a Trump victory. And at the same time, there are calls to fall in line and accept the results and move on in the name of unity. And this is where we find ourselves. Deep divisions are evident. Many feel insecure about their futures, and even those who are in the minority can't agree on how to move forward. And this is just like Palestine in the first century when Jesus lived. Because Palestine was under political occupation by Rome, and the Jewish people do not support Rome, and many groups have formed to resist the occupation. They are violent, and as you know, crucifixion is used to try and put down any rebellion in the country. But Rome has allowed the Jewish people to worship God in their temple in Jerusalem and maintain their practices. And the Pharisees are among the religious leaders of the Jewish people, and some of them have been appointed by Rome, and they have personal interests at stake in maintaining the Roman government. But others are just concerned about the survival of their way of life. They fear that if their population gets out of hand, Rome will destroy the temple and their people will be scattered. So the Pharisees are trying to keep a lid on these uprisings and preserve their faith, which seems to be under attack. Jesus is a threat to the status quo because he speaks of God in a different way, and he performs miracles and healings. And amongst his followers are sinners of all kinds, people who have been marginalized by the religious establishment, and many women who seem to be treated as equals in his community. And his influence is growing, and people come to be healed and to hear his words. And so it's no surprise, really, that the Pharisees want to stop him and silence his message. And they set about to trick him and show him as one who is not of them, one who does not obey the law of Moses. And their pawn on that day is a woman who's been caught in adultery. Notice it is she, this vulnerable one, that has been brought to Jesus. We don't see the man with whom she was consorting. The text says they caught her in the act. So he had to have been there, I think. Some people don't like to be caught in the act, but anyway, erase that. Sometimes my inside voice comes out. I apologize. Okay. The Pharisees say to him, as a test, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Moses," heavy name there, Moses, says in the law that we are to kill such women by stoning. What do you say about it? And there's no good answer to this question, because if Jesus says, yes, stone her, he risks alienating the people, because stoning, as you can imagine, is not popular. And he also risks the wrath of the Romans, because Jewish courts are not allowed to enact capital punishment. And worst of all, saying yes to stoning would go against his message of compassion and forgiveness. And so the lines have been drawn and the battle begins. But in the middle of this, posturing, maybe we could call it, stands this poor woman. She's not blameless, and her history is not known to us. Perhaps she's only looking to find a way to survive. Maybe she truly loves this man and feels compelled to break the rules, or it could be that he is providing her with gifts and other things that she wants. Who knows? All we know is that now she's trapped.
Dark desert highway, cool wind in my hair, warm smell of colitas rising up through the air. Up ahead in the distance, I saw a shimmering light. My head grew heavy and my sight grew dim. I had to stop for the night. And there she stood in the doorway. I heard the mission bell. I was thinking to myself, this could be heaven or this could be hell. Then she lit up a candle and she showed me the way. There were voices down the corridor. I thought I heard them say, welcome to the Hotel California. Such a lovely place. Such a lovely place. Plenty of room at the Hotel California. Any time of year, you can find it here. Her mind is Tiffany Quisted. She got the Mercedes Benz. She got a lot of pretty, pretty boys she called friends. How they danced in the courtyard, sweet summer sweat. Some dance to remember, some dance to forget. Mirrors on the ceiling, such a lovely place, such a lovely place. Living it up at the Hotel California. Every night tonight, bring your alibi. Last thing I remember, I was running for the door. I had to find the passage back to the place I was before. Relax, said the night man, we are programmed to receive. You can check out any time you like, but you can never leave.
So we're in the middle of our stewardship campaign. And because the major part of the campaign involves asking folk for money, and some people think this stewardship is all about budgets and figuring out how to pay the bills. But I think it's a lot more than that. Stewardship is about how we, as the people of God, use the resources that we have to further the mission of God. This involves not just the money we spend, but also the time we give, the energy we expend, and mostly the vision we pursue. If we're lazy stewards of all that God has given, our resources will be spent on things that serve our own purposes without thought for our neighborhood or the people that are hurting in the world. But if we're diligent stewards of these resources, they'll be used to heal the broken among us and around us, to further justice and equality for the vulnerable in our society, to provide a spiritual home for those who are seeking a more peaceful way of being. In short, to be the light in the world. The question in any stewardship campaign are, who are we and what are we about? Once again, today's text hints of what faithful stewardship entails, and we need to ask ourselves where we are in this story. I don't think the scribes and the Pharisees were bad people, just like I don't think most of Trump supporters are bad people either. I think they saw a way of life slipping away, and they wanted to preserve it. I read this book by a Jewish rabbi who argued that the Pharisees that we revile so much in Christianity were sort of like the Wesleyans in the Christian tradition. Because of exile and emigration, Jewish people were now found throughout the Roman Empire, and the Pharisees, were developing a way of practicing their faith that could survive this exile and the coming destruction of the temple, which they suspected would happen. And the laws they developed were designed to provide this careful structure of how to avoid sin and stay faithful. And it's understandable why they were threatened by Jesus. His way endangered their work. And they kind of had blinders on. I think we in faith communities have a tendency towards the same behavior. Too often we're obsessed with preserving what we think we are losing. Too often our churches are places of refuge and healing for us only and the friends we have here. And we draw comfort from familiar hymns and Bible readings and prayers, and it's hard to see what could be wrong with that, and truly, it's a gift to our community. But the problem is that caught between our comfortable pews and the way that Jesus is proclaiming are people who are struggling, like this vulnerable woman that the Pharisees bring. And they are spiritually and physically and economically and socially not able to make it. And they sit among us and they surround us in our community, because Acadia has many wonderful places, but there's also a lot of poverty and transience and immigrant populations just outside our doors. So some of us come to church to escape all that. And we have enough trouble in our day-to-day living, and we don't need to be reminded of these things. But if we ignore the woman caught in adultery, it's no better than using her to prove a point. Jesus' mission is to the vulnerable and to the outcasts, and he begins by seeing them as they are, not defined by their sin or their desperation, but as children of God who've been battered by time and circumstance. And so when the Pharisees bring her to him, he sees beyond her sin to her soul. And not only that, he looks at all those who are gathered there, the leaders, the people who follow them, and everyone who would dismiss or condemn this woman. And he says, let them who are without sin cast the first stone. And slowly, they all depart, starting with the oldest, the wisest among them, because when it comes down to it, we are all the same. We all fail. We are all selfish. We use people to our own ends. We fail to see the humanity of those who make us uncomfortable. We're all desperate. We've all sinned.
Seems to me so many things have been laid upon your table, but you only want the ones that you can get. Desperado, oh, you ain't getting no younger. You're losing all your highs and lows. It's funny how the feeling goes away. Desperado, why don't you come to your senses? Come down from your fences, open the gate. It may be raining, but there's a rainbow above you. You better let somebody love you. You better let somebody love you before it's too
So as I think back on the election, I wonder if there's a way to heal the divisions. Could we begin conversations that expand our understanding and compassion? Can we acknowledge the pain of those whose way of life has been decimated? Surely we can continue to speak for the disenfranchised and call out any acts of racism or misogyny or anti-immigrant rhetoric that we hear. But most importantly, we can continue to believe in a society that is welcoming and diverse and economically robust, and most of all, kind. We can't let our differences permanently divide us. And without sounding like church and politics are interchangeable, and they certainly are not. And we have people in these pews from across the spectrum, and I respect that. But I believe McDougall is called to be a spiritual light in this community. Since I arrived here, I've noticed how important it is for our congregation to ease suffering in the world and to be part of the solution in a tangible way. We see this through the Syrian Refugee Committee and the Feed the Hungry dinner, In From the Cold when it was active, partnerships with Acadia Networking, and the school lunch program, among others. We also have a spiritually curious congregation. Groups meet to read and discuss books as a kind of spiritual practice, I believe. The Christian Curiosity Club, I might have gotten that twisted up a bit, but they examine our history and they try to understand how our faith has evolved over time. There's a labyrinth that is a prominent feature of our hospitality hall, and spiritual nurture groups that are led by me or Bob are well attended and the conversations are rich. This community is open to worship in different ways and include a variety of theological expressions in our church. And I think we can build on these things. I dream of a day when McDougall will be known as the spiritual hub for this community. It'll be a place where people who are struggling will find rest. People with addictions or in poverty, who are unemployed, going through a divorce, dealing with kids who are depressed, or people who've lost a loved one and are lonely, or seniors who are suffering from disease or dementia, or might be going into extended care. Community care that is honest about our struggles, that embraces the marginalized among us, and that speaks into our lives as they are lived today, is a crucial part of a church in the 21st century. And so we as a community, through our JNAC, have said we need to have someone on staff who is committed to this new kind of pastoral care. Community care that reaches beyond our doors to be a source of healing for the broken in our community. But I also dream of a place where we examine our faith in this new and living way, where courses and classes are offered on ways to parent in a more loving way, or we provide a safe place for gay and lesbian folk who are looking for a way back into the spiritual community, where we study our scriptures with open minds and with our feet firmly planted in today's cultures and understanding, where people who are seeking meaning participate in worship and rituals that expand their sense of the mystery of God and of our lives. I see a place where families are supported and seniors are loved and empty nesters find that second act. And once again, McDougall through his JNAC has said they want to dedicate resources for connecting with those who are seeking a more spiritually grounded life and families who are looking for a loving community. And that's why stewardship is so important. Because if we focus on being a light in the world, of being a place where love is lived, of seeking God in ways that expand our understanding, then we will be a force for good in this world. The text ends with Jesus and this woman, and they're alone. And everyone else is gone. And he asks her, "Has anyone accused you?" And she says, almost unbelievably, "No." And he says these words of mercy, "I don't accuse you either. Go now and avoid these sins that have plagued you." He doesn't say all is forgotten or go ahead, do whatever you want. He acknowledges her sins and her brokenness and her struggles, and he says, you can leave that behind. There's a better way, a path of healing and peace and light. That is our hope and our purpose and our future. Amen.
I like the way your sparkling earrings lay against your skin so brown. I want to be with you in the desert tonight, with a billion stars all around. I got a peaceful, easy feeling, and I know you won't let me down, 'cause I'm already standing on the ground. I found out a long time ago what a woman can do to your soul. She can take you anyway. Don't already know how to go. I got a peaceful, easy feeling, and I know you won't let me down, 'cause I'm already standing on the ground. I got this feeling I may know you, keeps whispering in my other ear, tells me I may never see you again. 'Cause I got a peaceful, easy feeling, and I know you won't let me down, 'cause I'm already standing. Yes, I'm already standing. Yes, I'm already standing on the ground.